Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cast, coming at you on 13th the February, or the 13th of February, I should say, and this is the day of the second test between the Blackcaps and South Africa. So we're recording this earlier in the morning, and then later on in the podcast we might be able to catch the team selections. And then we'll bugger off and we'll go watch the cricket. So it does seem like Will O'Rourke will be selected. So that's what we're kind of waiting and seeing if that does happen. But I will throw up a little giggle because there's one bloke who's featured in all the Blackcaps content over the last few days. And it's Neil Wagner. But he might not even be playing in Hamilton. He might not even play a test against South Africa, even though there's a video of him just saying how much he loves playing against South Africa and all that stuff. So everything is pointing to the selection of Will O'Rourke. We'll wait and see, but that is to say that we will be discussing Blackcaps, or little live reaction to the test team later on in the podcast. Before then, we've got some Kiwi-NRL notes. We've got some Breakers update, tall Ferns and football Ferns and their Olympic qualification journeys, and bit of Ford Trophy, and of course Wellington Phoenix, fantastic game they had at the Cape Town. Good win for the Wellington Phoenix. So plenty of Aotearoa sports to discuss. And of course we are from theniche-case.com, where you can read some in-depth yarns. Got a basic map of many of the Kiwi-NRL juniors playing in the under-19 competitions across Queensland and New South Wales, as well as a bit of information about the New Zealand Warriors SG ball team. Of course, anyone who's listened to the podcast over the past couple of years will know most Kiwi-NRL juniors played first 15 rugby. So I highlighted that in the latest crop of Kiwi-NRL juniors. So you can read about that on our website, theniche-case.com. Are you going to be whipping up kind of a tall Ferns debrief? I think the football Ferns are ongoing, so we'll wait and see there. But what do you got on your radar for our website?
Yeah, football Ferns are ongoing. I might do something at the end of the group stage and then do the semis and final in a separate article. I might just do it all at once. We'll see how time goes. But tall Ferns absolutely is pretty much done. By the time the podcast comes out, that'll be up and published. So I might as well just say it's up and published now. The Tall Ferns debrief is certainly coming. Plus a bit of Flying Kiwis at some point, probably on Wednesday, because the Tall Ferns took a little bit of time to write.
Glad that you can predict the future. I also went deep into the Blackcaps test. The first test against South Africa, that is live. You can still check in with a whole bunch of stats, facts, and figures. Got a Ford Trophy update, so make sure you're on top of domestic cricket. That is on our website. We didn't have any HBJ Shield cricket over the weekend, but I did touch on some White Ferns wrinkles in the latest roundup there as well. So plenty of content on our website, theniche-case.com. And of course, we do have our newsletter via Substack coming out every Monday and Friday. The nichecase.substack.com. All the Niche Case is part of that Monday and Friday newsletter. We write specific things just for the newsletter. You get all the links to the deep dives on our website. You get all the podcast information. It's all there for you. And of course, you can then click through to support the Niche Case with a paid Substack subscription. Monthly is the best option there, so make sure you hit up the monthly paid Substack subscription, because then you can access our subscriber podcast as part of that, or you can join the Patreon whānau and access our subscriber podcast there as well. So we do our subscriber podcast every week, usually on a Thursday, as a bonus for the generous folks who support the Niche Case and fund our mahi straight up the guts. You can also make a donation through Buy Me a Coffee, and you can just subscribe on YouTube. You can just hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that good stuff as well. We're out here doing our best for Aotearoa sport, and we appreciate everyone who supports us through Patreon, Substack, and Buy Me a Coffee. Let's get a bit of mindfulness.
Alrighty, this is from my man William Butler Yeats. And sometimes these mindfulness things will have they'll use the word man in like a universal sense, and occasionally feel the need to point out, like, we're just talking man as in humanity, not man as in specifically the male gender. This one I think doesn't need that description. This one I think applies like quite specifically to a masculine uh inclination. The quote goes, "What man does not understand, he fears, and what he fears, he tends to destroy." I think that probably tells you a lot about how people. I mean, the first thing I think of is about how people, like in an ecological sense, how people treat nature and the planet we live on. I think that definitely applies there. I think basically every war that's ever happened would apply to the not understanding to fear to destruction continuum. I think we could probably go a lot further than that as well with examples. But yeah, what man does not understand, he fears. What he fears, he tends to destroy. Probably best to, from bringing that back to a personal standpoint, reel that all the way in and say, well, try to understand things so that you don't find yourself caught in that continuum.
Bit of empathy, bit of compassion is
Exactly.
always useful. And to your point, everything you explained there is a very masculine kind of storyline. It's a masculine arc. It's a lot of masculine, not like ideals in good and bad way, because obviously they can be deployed in a good fashion as well. But there's not a lot of Tao Te Ching kind of feminine energy in that in that breakdown there. So maybe a bit of compassion, bit of empathy might be useful, and just understand. Oh, bit of like art or war stuff. Understand your enemy. Although we don't want to, well, understand your enemy, and then you can help them out. You can,
once you understand them, they might not have to be your enemy anymore.
There you go, beauty. All right. At the moment, we are making a weekly habit of touching on some Kiwi-NRL junior notes, and I will highlight that some of these topics we do discuss on our Thursday subscriber podcast. So we're recording this on a Tuesday, so this is touching on the results and some of the performances from the weekend. But then on Thursday in our subscriber podcast, we do chat some updated team lists. We do chat, we'll be chatting more Blackcaps Test cricket. We'll be chatting Flying Kiwis as well. So the subscriber podcast is like our second podcast later in the week. So it's a good little addition to the podcast menu. But from the weekend's footy, I was especially interested in some of the trial stuff. We had Wynnum. They are affiliated with the Broncos, which made it interesting when, I'll get this name right because I think I've butchered the name a few times in the past, Nathaniel Tangi Mataiti. He's an Ellerslie junior from Auckland, and he has been rising through the system with Wynnum, and I think he is part of that Broncos system, although as we saw with Kaius Fa'atili from Christchurch, who was playing for Wynnum last year, now he's gone to the Melbourne Storm on a train and trial contract. You never really know until they start to crack through to that NRL bracket, but Nathaniel Tangamataiti, he was part of the under 19 Mount Meninga Cup and Hastings Daring Colts, which no longer exists, with the Wynnum Manly Seagulls, and he was part of a big old extended bench in their trial match against the Broncos. And I also see Sefa Roach Faimalo was part of that team, and I think he might be an Otahuhu Jr. I'm not too sure. I need to double check this on the fly. He's either an Otahuhu Jr. or a Maris Jr. He's a Maris Jr. So shout out to him. He was named at starting centre for Wynnum in that game. But you also had the Broncos with Josiah Karapani named at centre. And we've been talking about this over the summer. He left the Rabbitohs to go join the Broncos. And he was named at centre with Deine Mariner on the wing. And this highlights the depth, the Kiwi-NRL depth, because Karapani's from Otara. He's an East Tamaki Rugby junior. And Deine Mariner, obviously from Auckland, as well as a Maris junior. They are both centres. But to get game time in the NRL, you need to be able to play centre and wing. Like, that's how you're going to get your opportunities, if you can cover both of those positions. Warriors fans, you're probably thinking someone like well, Marcelo Montoya is a good job doer in that role at the NRL level, but then Ali Leotau is someone who I think can cover centre and wing at a pretty high level, and that's how he will get his opportunities. Karapani and Deine Mariner, they're competing for game time there at the Broncos as Kiwi-NRL juniors. Both were selected in that first trial, and I think the dude who's going to play more footy is the dude who can play wing and centre the best. Because there's a lot of centres who don't necessarily want to do those winger runs where you're returning from a kick and you've got to run it straight into a whole bunch of forwards. It's a very specific wing skill set, and I'll be interested to see which one of those two can kind of win the battle for game time as an outside back. They both probably prefer to play centre, but the Broncos, they got plenty of centres. I think Selwyn Cobbo is going to play centre this year with Katoni Staggs, so opportunities are limited for those two. And then we also had the first round of Mal Meninga Cup footy in Queensland. And I was specifically interested in the Redcliffe team because Tavita Nofahu from St. Kentigern College First 15, he's starting centre for Redcliffe Dolphins, Mal Meninga Cup under-19s. And he was on a train and trial contract with the Dolphins, and he scored 2 tries in his first game of Mal Meninga Cup over there in Queensland. So shout out to him. Looks very powerful, robust, and bit of a monster in the tackle as well. So that's a good sign. You always want your centres to be physically dominant, especially in defense. And that's what Tavita Nofahu looked like, which may have come after a summer with the Dolphins NRL squad. As I touched on this in the subscriber podcast last Thursday, the Dolphins had Elijah Rasmussen from Westlake Boys High School and Patrick Kailahi Takahiwai Jr. from up north, but also went to Hamilton Boys High School as their starting props. So the Redcliffe Dolphins, they got a bunch of Kiwi-NRL juniors in their system in their under-19 team. I also saw that the Tweed dudes, a few Tweed players scored tries. Mason Barber from the Hokianga region, he scored a try at fullback. Ryder Williams scored a try. Maris Jr. on a development contract with the Titans. So I don't think every team was playing Mal Meninga Cup this round, and we'll keep an eye on that as to what Kiwi-NRL juniors are competing in the under-19 competition in Queensland. As far as SG Ball goes, the Warriors bounced back with a good win over the Bears. And the dude, Motu Pasakala, keeps scoring tries. I think that Premier League football dream might be over for Motu Pasakala. For those who don't know, came from Tonga, played for Liston College First 15, and now he's the fullback for the Warriors SG Ball team. And we think he was part of the Tongan under-19 or under-21, I'm not sure which one it is, football team. So watch out for Motu Pasakala. The Warriors won that game 48-12, bunch of try scorers, bunch of stuff happening there. Other try scoring notes that I did have were Pharrell Gray. Call you Pharrell because you're the truth. He scored for the Sharks again. He scored 2 tries for the Sharks last week, 1 try for the Sharks this week. He's from Wellington, and he's an edge forward for the Sharks. You also had Levi Gwyn Tuitahi, who was playing for King's College First 15 last year. Didn't play SG Ball for the Balmain Tigers last weekend. Starting centre this weekend, scores a try. Shout out to him. And, of course, another dude who's scoring a bunch of tries is Josiah Alatini. He's a Hornby junior from Christchurch. He's in the Bulldogs system. 2 tries this weekend in their win over the Knights. That game also featured Sasaya Latu scoring a try for the Knights. He's a Mangarees junior. And Sheldon Hayward scored a try on the wing for the Bulldogs. I think he's a Linwood junior. So lots of good stuff happening there. Lots of try scorers. Obviously, NRL trials are coming as well. And that's always interesting to see where the youngsters from Aotearoa fit in to their respective NRL systems. And we'll keep track of that over the coming weeks, especially next Thursday for our subscriber podcast.
Beauty. Do you have like a master list of all the Kiwi-NRL juniors, or do you just like roll through who went to what school and what as you do it, like just from memory? Because that's never not impressive.
I tend to write it out a few times. I usually go that way, just writing it out. Um, making sure I write the names and write the school, write the club. As we're like, the tricky thing is trying to nail down one club, one school, like whether it's the club that deserves preference, whether it's the school, but trying to just provide that basic information. I do have a list in a saved document, but I actually find writing it out is the best thing. So just write out, these are the dudes who did something this weekend, and then I have, each time I write the name, I'll write out the club or school that I am using to big up that grassroots organization, because most of these dudes did come from rugby league clubs or schools around Aotearoa that are producing a lot of rugby league talent. So that's always happening. And I mean, in the coming years, I might need to do I might need a book, because there's so many youngsters from Aotearoa rising up the ranks in the Kiwi-NRL pipelines. Another, the Breakers had a win.
Okay.
I mean, the Breakers had
Guess
a win.
what else they had?
And then they had a loss, and that's what the Breakers are doing at the moment, although they have worked their way into the play-in tournament. Like, again, the NBL, like, you can
finish in the bottom half and still make the finals if things break right for you.
Well, I'm thinking more like the NBL. You can use terms that the NBA doesn't use. Like, it's all right. You don't have to copy the NBA for everything. You can create your own ideas, your own terminology, because the NBL, obviously, copying the NBA, they need a play-in tournament right now. And the Breakers, they are on the fringe of that play-in tournament. They had a win against someone, and then they had a loss against Melbourne United. So they had a win against Illawarra Hawks at home, and then they lost to Melbourne United. Although Melbourne United, they are the best team in the NBL right now. Win-loss. And that's the Breakers recipe. They seem to still manage to be able to like whip up some buzz with a win. Yeah, the finals hopes are alive. They're competing hard, and then they lose. And then it's like, well, the Breakers kind of suck. And then they win. And it's the finals hopes are alive. They're competing hard. They're fighting for their season, and then they lose. It's just that up and down cycle with the Breakers, but they are in the play-in tournament. So as long as they're in that play-in tournament bracket, they're going to be in the mix. What have you made of the Breakers over the past week with the win over Illawarra, loss to Melbourne United? Melbourne United, of course, Shea Ili, big man of the NBL from Aotearoa.
Yeah, Shea Ili, 12 points, 5 assists in that game. He was a plus 16 on the floor, which was the best of any of Melbourne's starters. A couple of their bench players did go above that with their plus-minus impact, but you can imagine why that is, because the Breakers right now don't have a lot of depth, and they don't actually use a lot of their depth. They're going with like 8-man rotations, basically, sometimes barely even that. Injuries obviously being a big factor there, but also they just don't use the depth Kiwis. So
well, the Kiwi bit is niggly, but if you're trying to win games, the easiest way to win,
you want your best players out there, and it is the end of the season, and you gotta ride those guys relatively hard in order to get to where they're trying to get, which is a play-in tournament.
That's what I've noticed about the NBA. Like, if you want to win NBA games, you just stop playing the guys who suck.
Yeah, that's the clear thing in the NBA is regular season rotation versus playoff rotation, right?
Yeah, whatever the rotation, if you stop playing the guys who suck, you're going to win games because your best players are playing more minutes. And I'm interested in how that looks over, like, for an NRL context, or I think it's less evident in football, but over the course of an NRL season, your guys coming off the bench, they're going to play a lot of minutes. But then to win games, you need, like, for the Warriors to win games again. Oh, these are some good Warriors tie-ins here throughout the podcast. But you want, Whenua Blake, Tohu Harris, Mitchell Barnett, Maratania Corey playing most of your minutes. Every time you divert away from that and give a youngster some minutes, you might lose a few nuances of your attack, of your system, of your good footy. But it is something that is crystal clear in basketball. So I don't really view it as a negative. If you're not using your depth, that just means you want to win.
Yeah, but also if you're that's entirely true. But also if you're the weaker team playing against the best team in the competition and they have depth and you don't, it makes sense that the second unit is going to come out there and like torch you, right? Make sure when you do go to your bench and you have to, and then the key guys are having to play 35 plus minutes and getting exhausted or whatever. Like, yeah, they're the team that can keep their guys fresh for longer, and they're probably going to roll you. And that game was not as close as the 94-81, I think, scoreline suggested. Like, they were down big for large periods of that. They actually closed it up in the fourth quarter a little bit. So the scoreline almost flattered them a bit. But, I mean, that's just the Breakers pattern at the moment. I'll tell you what, they're good at, like, you're right in that sort of rotation thing is less evident in football, I guess, just because the subs don't come on and off again, pretty much, is the main reason why that's the case. But there is a good example that we'll talk about later, I guess, with the Wellington Phoenix, because they've had that thing where like 7 or 8 of their players have started every game, or only missed 1 or 2 games along the way. There's not been a lot of rotation, and they're winning a lot of games because they're keeping those same combinations. Their best players are on the pitch altogether, with the exception of Oscar Zavada, who continues to miss time, and they continue to find ways to win and score the odd goal without him. So, yeah, we'll come back to the Phoenix later. But with the Breakers, there's 1 round left, right? And they currently sit 6th, which is exactly on the edge of the play-in tournament. But Sydney lost on Sunday, and they only have 1 game left, and they more or less have to win that. I mean, the Breakers, I think they play Brisbane on Friday. Let me just check that. Friday. They play Brisbane at home on Friday. Then on Sunday, they play away to Adelaide. So the standard Breakers pattern would be that they win at home against Brisbane and then go lose away to Adelaide, even though Adelaide are the worst team of those 2. They'd probably still get them into the play-in. I suspect there might be some, like if Sydney win their game and then who are Sydney playing? Let me just double check that. Sydney are playing away to Southeast Melbourne, who are the worst team in the competition. So Sydney should win that game, which might make things a little bit frisky. But then also, I think the Breakers would get the tiebreaker over. It's not a tiebreaker, it's just like points percentage. But they have it's very close between New Zealand and Sydney. So if those 2 are tied, that could go either way. But I think if the Breakers beat Brisbane, they're almost certain to finish. No, Brisbane only got 1 game left. So, yeah, they would finish ahead of Brisbane if they beat them. So a win on Friday would pretty much put them through into the play-in tournament. If they win both, there is still a chance they could get up to 4th and avoid the play-in tournament, in which case they would play against 3rd place Tasmania and then the winner would go through to face either Melbourne or Perth in the semis, and the loser would get a second chance against the winner of the play-in tournament. That's possible. They might do that. We'll see how they go. The thing about this Breakers team is they're not terrible. Just they made the finals last year, and now they're scraping into the play-in tournament and might well do so with a losing record. Even it's a bit of a weird one how they've changed the thing up, the format up. I guess because they want it to be more like the NBA. We need to have a play-in tournament because they have a play-in tournament, like you said. It's a strange format because a few seasons ago it was just top 4 and the Breakers would already be out of it. And with a losing record with 2 games to go, you'd say, well, they deserve to be out of it. But now a losing record might get them into the play-in. And everyone keeps saying all along, it's that same thing about the buzz that they create. It's like, well, you wouldn't want to face them in the playoffs because who knows, they might just catch fire. They got so much talent in there. And I'm thinking, well, we've had an entire season's worth of seeing that this talent doesn't equal consistent wins. They've had like 1 decent win streak and it was followed immediately by a losing streak. Like they're not, they've just not been able to string victories together over and over. That's why they're hovering around that even maybe slightly losing record, is because they've had this pattern all along of win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game. I don't think that's going to serve you too well in the playoffs, where you really just need to start like a play-in tournament is a one-off. And then I think the second one might be a one-off as well, and then it's a series in the semis and a series in the final. An inconsistent team that wins one, loses one isn't probably going to make a run in the playoffs, but it would be, it's obviously preferable to get there rather than not getting there. And they do have a few Tall Blacks players in there that we want to see doing well. Want to see Tom Abercrombie potentially in his last season get a nice little playoff run. Want to see Finn Delaney coming back into fitness and having a big impact. Want to see Isaiah Le'afa hitting 3-pointers. So we'll see how they go. I don't have a lot of faith in them once they get to the play-in, but I think they probably will get to that play-in. And that game against Brisbane is the big one on Friday night, because if they win that, they're pretty much in. It doesn't really matter what happens after that. But yeah, Breakers have kept us guessing all season, so I guess we don't want to be making any we don't want to be making any predictions on that one.
You did mention the Breakers have a losing record, but so do Brisbane. Illawarra 13-13, so they have an even record of wins and losses, which means half of the playoffs teams, or the play-in teams / playoff teams, have an even or losing record.
Which won't change because none of them can get up to a winning record from here.
Which, there's always a discussion, like in the NRL, top 8 teams. You might get lucky and one of those teams has a losing record. And then it's like, well, what are they doing in the finals? Why are you here? You got a losing record, what are you doing? Half of the teams in the NBL play-in, playoff mix have even or worse records. So, which, 6, let's flip it around to the other way. 3 out of the 6 play-in, playoff teams have winning records. I don't know what it means, but it's just happening. It's weird, it's quirky, it is maybe interesting. The Tall Ferns.
Well, just part of what it means is that Melbourne and Perth have been winning heaps of games, and so everyone else, there's not so many wins to go around. And I find it very hard to imagine Melbourne or Perth not winning. Like, one of those two teams is going to win this championship because they're just far and away the best two teams, which is a good thing for Kiwi basketball, because Shea Ili, Flynn Cameron with Melbourne, not to mention Rob Lowe giving them a bit of a boost at the start. Perth have Ty Webster, they got Hiram Harris, they got Corey Webster racking up DMPs at the moment, but he's still on the roster. Plus Jack Andrew and Dante Russo Nance as development players. Aaron Young, Kiwi American assistant coach there as well. A lot of Kiwi influence on those two best teams.
The Tall Ferns were unfortunately bundled out of their Olympic qualifying tournament. They lost all 3 games, but the loss to Puerto Rico was the closest one, best opportunity to win, but unfortunately they lost by a small margin before losing by a bigger margin against France, I believe, in the final game. Ultimately, we kind of knew this was the vibe coming in. Very young squad, couple of injuries, and it seems like the talent and the growth of basketball has been countered by some bad juju. Whether it's Stephen Adams' injury, that because he was considering coming back for the Tall Blacks to make his Tall Blacks debut. He was considering putting himself in the mix, and then he gets injured. That we've talked about a fair bit. So that was unfortunate. I'm sure there's some other unfortunate events that have happened over the past few years as well. Then you come into the most recent cycle. Penina Davidson, she's injured. Charlie Sledger-Walker, she's injured. And I don't think the results for either team, Tall Blacks or Tall Ferns, reflect the state of basketball in New Zealand. It seems to me like basketball has been on a considerable growth curve. Players are getting better. The depth is at an all-time high, men's and women's. The opportunities are flying through the roof. Basketball is going to be, if it isn't already, one of the biggest sports in Aotearoa. But unfortunately, at this moment of international basketball, for whatever reason, I don't think it's anything that like basketball has done from a New Zealand perspective. Like Basketball New Zealand, I don't think they're creating this bad juju. I think the players are all good folks. So I don't think they are creating this bad juju. But somehow there is bad juju impacting the basketball results, mainly with injuries, and key injuries, as we've seen for the Tall Ferns. but I think this is going to set up both basketball teams, specifically the Tall Ferns, for better times in the future, because all the players that went through that Olympic qualifying tournament, they'll be better off for it. And you mentioned the player who stepped in for Charlie Sledger-Walker. She overtook Charlie Sledger-Walker as the youngest debutant for the Tall Ferns. You dropped a note in our newsletter yesterday about the ages of those players and how young this group was. And the result is a bummer, but I think ultimately it's just setting the Tall Ferns and, in a bigger picture, New Zealand basketball up for better times in the future, when maybe some of that bad juju is snuffed out with a bit of sage burning or whatever you want to do to break the curse.
Yeah, well, something's got to be done, because I hadn't even thought about it from that Tall Blacks perspective as well. Because of course they went to the World Cup last year, and Stephen Adams being injured was the big bummer, the big one that fits into that curse thing. But then you think about their squad in general, like Tom Abercrombie and Rob Lowe retired rather than going on it. The Webster brothers withdrew relatively late, having started doing the training camps, but then didn't follow through. Sam Wardenberg didn't do any of it. He was over trying to do
that. You could make a starting five out of the players that were unavailable.
Yeah, and it was probably better than the starting five that they had available, and it would have been the same thing with the Tall Ferns at these Olympic qualifiers. Like, because they're the thing about that Asia Cup effort, where they got finished fourth, qualified them for this tournament. It's their best ever finish at the Asia Cup, I think, in their third attempt since sort of Oceania got swallowed up into the Asia bracket. Like that Asia Cup team was really young as well. Like that itself felt like a bit of a reset. It's like, okay, here we're going fully in on the, like, Charlie Sledger-Walker is our best player. Penina Davidson is our other best player. We're going to bring in like Talia Tupaya as a dual national, and let some of these younger emerging players really take over. And there was no Michaela Cox, there's no Gillian Harmon, or some of these players who've sort of anchored them for the decade prior. Like that itself was a bit of a reset. And then from an already young and experienced sort of fresh team, you lose half of them, slightly more. I think they only have 5 out of 12 players who were here. It was going to be 6, but of course Charlie Sledger-Walker got injured at the last minute, and a bad injury too. But yeah, that they skewed super young for these Olympic qualifiers. They were asking players who were sort of getting 10, 15 minutes off the bench in the Asia Cup and a young squad there to suddenly step up and be key players. And for the most part, they did. Like, I think Ezra McGoldrick had a really solid tournament. I think someone who looked like she wanted to own that extra responsibility, which means a lot. It's something I might mention about, I think, Macy Fraser last week, debuting for the Football Ferns and wanting to get on the ball, wanting to create things, wanting to be the spark. Just that mentality of stepping up is as much to do with the ability to step up. And like Tara Reid as well, someone else who Stella Beck against Puerto Rico was unbelievable. Like I think she's by far the most experienced player in this squad. She's the only one who's played 50 caps. I don't think anyone else had got to 20. Stella Beck in the must-win game against Puerto Rico was taking charges. She was grabbing rebounds against players bigger than her. She was pretty much playing the point guard position and instigating things with the ball handling and passing and driving to the hoop and finishing. And at one point, she was the only one who felt like she was going to create offense, but she kept doing it time and time again, and grabbing steals, playing good defense. Like she was doing everything. It was unreal, like a complete captain's knock. And if they'd won that would have gone down as like legendary Tall Ferns performance. And maybe it still kind of deserves to be thought of that way. But unfortunately, we didn't win, so no one wants to think of it fondly. But the reason they didn't win is because they can't shoot 3-pointers. And they missed some free throws. There's other little things you could point at, but ultimately they shot 9 of 70 across the 3 games, which is shockingly bad. But then also like there were 2 players who hit multiple 3-pointers across the tournament, and everyone except I think Amy West at least attempted one. Only 2 made 2. I was going to say 2 plus, but no one made more than plus. Ezra McGoldrick shot 2 of 16, so she got her 2 by shooting the most attempts of everyone. And I think both were in the last game as well against France. And who was the other? McKenna Dale. McKenna Dale was someone who one of the 4 debutantes in the squad. So a third of the squad were debutantes. I thought Dale was going to come in and play a really a really kind of prominent role as someone who's shown in Tauihi at least that she can be a scorer. I think she had a 30-point game in the Tauihi last year. She played half a game. She hit 2 3-pointers early on against Puerto Rico, set New Zealand up nicely, then rolled her ankle. And then the third game, the day later, was like in a moon boot on crutches. So the injury curse didn't stop there. I think Tara Reid as well she played well overall, but had a really rough shooting day against Puerto Rico and missed a few like layups where it's not just jump shots that bounce out. It's like layups where you don't really have an excuse for missing those one. But also she does have an excuse. She got elbowed in the eye and had an ice pack on her head at one point, and she played through it. But then she set out the next game the day later, which I guess you would, if the game had nothing on it, and that's why France destroyed us. But can't help but feel maybe the head knockers effect and how that went as well. So there's just it's hard not to think about it from that cursed perspective. It's just that many injuries all the way through, even in the tournament itself. However, for a team that we have established, it's very young to start with, missing a bunch of players, still came within one missed 3-pointer of the 61 missed 3-pointers that they had across these 3 games. Although, to be fair, what happened against China doesn't matter. What happened against France doesn't matter. It was really just that Puerto Rico game that counted. They did lead that game with less than a minute to go, and then they missed a couple of threes, and then Puerto Rico made some good buckets and blah, blah, blah. To get that close under that much adversity with that young of a squad, like, that says something. That swings back around to what you're saying at the start about like there's the luck hasn't been there for not the Tall Blacks last year, not the Tall Ferns this year. They're not going to be going to the Olympics, although the Tall Blacks, they've still got a chance, but they got a pretty rough group. They might run into old mate Giannis again, as seems to happen every time the Tall Blacks, every time they play, they got to play against these fellas. Some kind of NBA superstar, although Giannis didn't go to the World Cup. I think they dodged him there because he got injured. The talent is undeniable. And I don't know that there's been another era in Tall Ferns basketball where they could have got this close with that, like dipping that far into the depth. And you can see, like, it's harder to win with younger players. And maybe I do think there's like an inkling of maybe they picked a little bit too young in one or two cases. Like, could you have found a more solid, established guard to take Charlie Sledger Walker's place? Maybe, but I don't know. Like, I still like what I saw from Payless Hokianga there, and small sample sizes. Like, she didn't get a point, she didn't get an assist, she had 5 turnovers. So the actual stats don't look great. When you see her play and you see like a real slick handle and great speed and athleticism for a 16-year-old, and like the mentality to want to take players on and not be daunted by it. Like, it didn't work, but the tools are there for someone who's clearly going to be a hell of a player. And like, Ratoya Tamilo had a really nice game against Puerto Rico, doing like rolling to the hoop and getting shots up and doing nice things. And I mentioned about McGoldrick, Reed, some of these players who might have been seen as second-tier players even just a year or two ago, stepping up to be like key players in this example. Taylor Dalton's another one you could put in there. Lauren Hippolyte probably didn't have a best tournament, but like, she's someone who's not going to shy away from that either. Like the depth, and then like. Special mention here for Lauren Whitaker, who's 18 years old out of Canterbury region, and she was fantastic. Like, for like the idea about you can't win stuff with young players, like, she's the one player who kind of bucked that of the sort of teenagers in the squad, because she was playing clutch minutes against Puerto Rico, and she was having a real positive impact. She hit a 3-pointer that broke a long drought. I think they'd missed 18 in a row as a team, and then she's the one, the teenage big as well. She's a sort of center power forward. She's the one who hit the 3-pointer, so she's got shooting range. She's got some sneaky little passing skills. She's got good size as well and strength. She's seems like a pretty good screener, and she moves well laterally. I'm watching her, thinking like, because she was MVP at the under-19s nationals a year ago, I think, and also did the Basketball Without Borders kind of NBA camp thing, the only New Zealand woman who was represented on that. that alone, and this was a year after coming back from an ACL injury, which he suffered at like 16 or something. So that alone tells you that that's an elite prospect right there. And then seeing her play for the first time extended in these Tall Ferns things, like that's a hell of a player we got coming through there. And there's someone like that popping up every few months at the moment. So um, this tour didn't work for them, won't be at these Olympics, but let's see what they're like in 2 years' time when the next World Cup qualifying campaign comes around, which will look a lot like what these Olympic ones did. Asia Cup before that to try and qualify. Seems like if you can, squeeze back in some of them Charlie Sledger Walkers and Panina Davidsons, etc., they're not going to be any worse players in 2 years' time. It seems like the direction is only heading in a positive manner. It's just unfortunately nothing broke right for them at this tournament. But so it goes. As Stella Beck said, that's sport, and the next time maybe the good karma comes back around.
I do think there'll be big benefits from just having, like, the more camps you can have, the more tours, especially these type of teams where it's a bit more infrequent, but especially if you can bring in the younger players into a Tall Ferns environment, I don't think that will be just as important as giving those players the game time in the international basketball arena. And that's what I think is happening with the Football Ferns. The Football Ferns, I think they play Vanuatu later this afternoon, but regardless of what's happening on the field, I think the Football Ferns are going to benefit greatly from this type of environment, because you're like, whoa, what are all these like professional football players doing in Samoa? Like, it seems like a cynical, negative Ned might view it as like a step down. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're going from your professional football team to a Football Ferns camp in Samoa. But I think that is the ideal camp squad environment for a New Zealand Aotearoa team like the Football Ferns. You get to come together in a very relaxed, competitive environment, not like relaxed and competitive, not a relaxed competitive, but relaxed and competitive environment that also helps you like tap into like who are we representing. Because if you're an Aotearoa team, you're representing the Oceania region, and being around those players in that cultural environment, I think, is going to be hugely beneficial for a lot of those Football Ferns players. And we don't need to get into the nitty gritty of these Football Ferns games because they're winning the games and they're building towards the qualification. But I'm curious if we're to rank and compare the Ferns, so the Tall Ferns, the White Ferns, the Football Ferns, and the Kiwi Ferns, how would you sort them out? Well, how would I sort them out? And then I'll let you sort them out. I think I've got... It's obviously apples and oranges, right? Because like the Kiwi Ferns don't necessarily play a global sport, but they did defeat Australia last year, and I think that holds a lot of weight. I think I've got the Kiwi Ferns first. Let me put it that way, because I think they've had the best results recently in defeating Australia. Gritty performance against Australia last year. There's only like 3 or 4 good women's rugby league teams, so again, it's apples and oranges. But this goes to my point, because then I've got Football Ferns, White Ferns, and Tall Ferns. But I don't necessarily see a whole lot of difference, and I could be convinced into any ranking of those 4 teams. I think they're all in similar spots with a lot of growth and a lot of opportunity ahead of them. And I could make a case that the White Ferns are better than the Kiwi Ferns and the Football Ferns and the Tall Ferns. I could say that the Football Ferns are better than the Kiwi Ferns, let alone the White Ferns. So I'm like curious if you could offer any more details to help that comparison, help that ranking with the 4 women's teams of our big 4: basketball, rugby league, cricket, and football. And they're all Ferns. They're all a variety of Ferns. So how would you rank or organize those 4 teams?
Well, I think all 4 of those sports on the women's side are kind of exploding like globally at the moment, which is part of the context. It's how like there's the Women's World Cup in football was massive. The cricket's getting the women's IPL, etc., all these things, right? Women's NRL boosting through, and I think Yeah, I think the Kiwi Ferns have to be like I don't know. The perspective depends on what you're trying to rank them by. But if I guess success is the best measurement, and Kiwi Ferns have
Well,
that,
I
whereas the
think
other teams don't
like one
necessarily.
thing, they're all four sports are on the rise, as you said. All four sports have incredible depth. All four sports have classy players. Like there's a lot of similarities
Mm.
across all four teams. So I think the only defining factor to organize them is success.
Yeah, and in which case Kiwi Ferns you are number one because they've done the most they've had the most significant result. I I'm not sure because I could swing back and forth on any of those because I think of the others, the White Ferns are the team that should be the most dominant in their sport just because it's this that's the next smallest sport after the rugby league. And I'm not sure that they are. The football ferns we know struggle to turn performances and promises into results and also into goals, but they did beat Norway at the World Cup, and that was pretty massive. They had a draw against Switzerland. That was, still a completely underrated effort as well. But the Tall Ferns had their fourth place finish at the Asia Cup, which is something tangible and significant to fall back upon as well. So I think, yeah, I could shuffle those in any three directions. My first instinct was to say Tall Ferns, Football Ferns, White Ferns. Now I'm almost wondering if that shouldn't be the other way around, or if maybe Football Ferns should be ahead of Tall Ferns. I don't know. I think the key thing with those three teams, whereas the Kiwi Ferns have had a massive sort of result, we've seen what they're capable at the ceiling kind of thing. Those other three teams in their current inclinations, because obviously the White Ferns have had dominant eras in the past, but for sort of the team that they've got at the moment, I think all three of those teams feel like teams that in keeping with the parallel of their sport rising and keeping with the parallel of their local depth and young talent rising, it feels like those teams themselves have not hit their peak either. Like they're all building towards something that will see like success that will come in the future. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Um, in which case, yeah, it is difficult to rank because at some point that's just going to change. Whoever gets there first is gonna upset the apple cart. So I don't know. I just see positivity and promise from those sides, and I just hope that they can get to. I hope they can fulfill that basically, because of course there's a big difference between having potential and realizing potential, and that's arguably the hardest part of this whole process is the actualizing of that stuff. So I guess we see over the coming years.
Another thing that I was thinking, I wrote it down and then I checked in with what you wrote in our newsletter yesterday, and you shared a similar sentiment. But the Wellington Phoenix had a 2-0 win, I think it was against Western United, who are bottom of the league. So we've still got the Wellington Phoenix top of the league, still got the Blackcaps top of the World Test Championship. What do you know? Aotearoa is the best sporting nation in the world. A lot of stuff was happening in that Wellington Phoenix game, but the thing that I wrote down was like, I just love Ben Old. So much good stuff happens around Ben Old. His not just his footballing skill, but like his energy, his work rate, but also the zip and the aggression and the vitality that he does play with. I love it, and I just think a lot of good stuff happens with Ben Old when Ben Old is around the footy. And if I'm getting that vibe from Ben Old, and he's doing that, and he's catching my attention to that degree in the best team in the A-League, you could say that Ben Old's one of the best youngsters in the A-League. And that, you can't say that. Like, you can't say that when the Wellington Phoenix is 7th or 8th. But you can say it when the Wellington Phoenix are 1st, and they have a young player like Ben Old, let alone any of their other young players. And this goes to the point you wrote in the newsletter yesterday. If the best team in the league is rolling out a production line of young talent that is like the Warriors and unlike the New Zealand Breakers, that there's a case to be made that the Wellington Phoenix are the best A-League organization right now, because they're the best team at a high performance level, and they have the best young talent contributing to the best team in the league. But I specifically thought about Ben Old because no one really throws up Ben Old as one of the best young players in the A-League, if not the best young player in the A-League. but he is contributing at a high level to the best team in the league. So when you're the best team in the league, these conversations start to become, is Alex Rufer one of the best players in the A-League? Because again, if Alex Rufer's just going about his mahi, his gritty defense, distribution for a mid-tier team, you're like, oh yeah, he's another solid Kiwi battler. But Alex Rufer is pulling the strings in the midfield for the best team in the A-League, which changes the whole conversation when we're assessing these players. And I think it's something that we can't overlook with the Wellington Phoenix. And the other thing that I was thinking about is like, Kraev he's developing some mana with the Wellington Phoenix. He's developing some Aotearoa mana. Like, he's playing a bunch of different positions. Like Ben Old, a lot of good stuff just comes from Kraev, but I think Kraev plays a bigger role in the sense that he's covering more positions, he's covering more ground, he's got more scope with and without the ball. Like, there was the play the other week where he was tracking back and he made a big interception the game before this recent game against Western United, and like the centre backs were drawn over to the side and he just like boosted all the way back against one of the Mariners players and got a key interception. And I like, again, if Kraev is doing that for the best team in the league, it makes him one of the best players in the A-League as well. Like, there's a lot of these wrinkles that you can now put into the spotlight, given that the Wellington Phoenix are the best team in the A-League. They got the most wins. They've only got 2 losses. So, like, the Mariners have 8 wins and 5 losses. The Wellington Phoenix have 9 wins and 2 losses. Like, they are pretty damn good at football. And across their squad, across their roster, let alone the coach, let alone the development staff who are organizing these youngsters at the lower levels, all of the elements of a professional sporting organization, now we need to consider them like, whoa, this is the best in the league because this team is the best team in the league.
Yeah, like, it's easy to, because just pure academy minutes on its own can be an empty gesture, right? If you're just given debut, if you're coming last and there's nothing on the games and you're just like, well, we're going to play the kids because you've nothing else to play for. It sort of starts to feel like, I don't know, your West Tigers or something, or, you know, it's there's nothing on the line at that stage. There's nothing at stake.
Your mate Shane Flanagan, he's already said that this season's...
That's true. He's already written off the Dragon season.
So another classic ploy to like, well, don't worry about my job this year because we're going to suck this year.
Don't judge me or anything. We're going to lose regardless. It's the last guy's fault. That kind of stuff. Like, there's kind of stuff you can say or you can do in the case of flipping, but it's the kind of thing you say and then it draws attention and maybe the wrong way. But if you're chucking out debuts to academy players when you're losing heaps, it's sometimes just a way to get the fans on side and whatever, or just a way to find something productive out of an unproductive season. But it doesn't necessarily mean those players aren't coming and helping you win or anything like that. You're bottom of the table. You're top of the table and you're still doing that. That says something completely different. And that's where the Wellington Phoenix are at. Like, they've almost just cut out the middleman. You know, they've got some good, solid, experienced locals who are holding things down. They've got a crew of imports who are mostly all pretty good. And then they've got their academy players. And there's no one in the middle there between those two things, between like solid established and academy coming up kind of thing. Whereas most teams fill out their squad with that, with that guy on the mid-level contract who does mid-level kind of plays mid-level kind of minutes with a mid-level kind of production, like just solid, you know, steady players around there. The guys who were the solid, steady players for the Phoenix are like Rufer and I don't know, some of the imports probably played at the level past. T-Pain certainly, you know, even a bit of, I think Costa was probably signed, expected to be more than that, was less than that last year, and there's more than more this year. Those guys have stepped up into being fantastic players across the A-League. So there's a lack of a middle class in this Wellington Phoenix team, and I don't know. It clears the path for the academy players to step up. And yeah, Ben Old probably is one of the best young players in the A League. I'm not even sure if he's the second best young player in the Wellington Phoenix. Obviously, Alex Paulson has to be right up there, and I think Finn Sermon has to be right up there as well. And you got three dudes doing that, let alone someone like Lucas Kelly-Hield, who started most games. Like, those also are not empty minutes. Those are not academy players who are getting 5-10 minutes at the end of a 3-0 win, or subbed on in stoppage time. It's not that kind of thing. These are guys who are keeping clean sheets, scoring and setting up goals, contributing to victories, playing big key roles. Like, that's something completely different to what you often see with teams who lean on their academy and do it as a way to sort of, I don't know, like obfuscate for the fact that they're losing. Like, it's just shielding the fact that other things aren't working. The Phoenix are functioning on both of those ends of the scales, which is unreal stuff. Like, you think there's a reason people thought the Wellington Phoenix would be wooden spooners or thereabouts coming into the season. I thought they were going to struggle plenty this season. I think most fans thought that. It's not just like them Aussies. They don't respect us. They don't believe in us. Like, most Wellington Phoenix fans saw it this way too. You had to see it this way because they lost half their starting lineup, didn't replace them. But it turns out they did replace them because these younger guys were better than we expected, and they've got a coach who can get the best out of them straight away and at an A-League level. It's actually kind of baffling to think how they've managed to pull off this juggling act to this point. I think it's a hell of a, above all, I suppose, it's a hell of a coaching achievement from Chiefy.
I do love using the word baffling, but this isn't baffling. This is just New Zealand sport. Like this, you go across every sport. We've mentioned the Tall Ferns. They went young. And yeah, they didn't win games, but the younger crew are going to make the Tall Ferns successful better than they've ever been over the coming years. And we've talked about it a lot. The younger athletes from Aotearoa are all extremely talented, and considering what we've seen across the various sports, specifically what's happened with the New Zealand Warriors, like when you embrace that local system and you invest in that local system, the talent is going to be there. And that's what the Wellington Phoenix have done. So it could be viewed as baffling, but it also just seems aligned with everything else about Aotearoa sport at the moment. Do you have any other Phoenix stuff, or we got to get a wiggle on some cricket? Any notes from that win?
Not really. I thought it was just one of those routine wins that you get midway through a season, when you score early in the half against a team lacking in confidence, get them playing from behind as quickly as you can, and then you can control the match from there. Score early in the second half, and there's your 2-0 win. It's like the definitive kind of routine victory. Get to rest a couple of key players by subbing them off a little earlier, That's just how you maintain first place on the table, is by winning those sort of games in that sort of manner, where it just doesn't really feel like they had to dive too deep to get that one. You just get out there and do the job with relatively minimal risk or like sort of over the top kind of effort. It's good solid stuff, and I suppose from there we wriggle on into bit of Ford Trophy, I suppose.
We do have Ford Trophy with another round of games starting off tomorrow, I believe, Wednesday. Yes, we have Wednesday games, and at the moment the table looks like this. Northern Districts are first, Canterbury, CD, Otago, Auckland and Wellington. So Auckland and Wellington were in the Super Smash finals, and now they're the worst two teams of the Ford Trophy. But the one thing that I am fascinated in, again, drawing this back to what we were talking about with the Phoenix, Will O'Rourke may or may not make his test debut. We're going to see that in a couple of minutes. But Will O'Rourke, yeah, he's a freaky seamer. He's a freaky seamer from Aotearoa. He's tall. Well, the thing about New Zealand sport, the thing about what makes us so excited about covering Aotearoa sport is the youngsters are pretty damn good at their respective sports. And it's like, well, Will O'Rourke's tall, and he bowls with good nip, good zip, good pace, good movement. Well, we've got Cole Jamieson and we've also got Henry Shipley. I did see Henry Shipley bowled a few overs for Canterbury Canterbury second 11, so he might be back in the mix. So if you're buzzing about it, Will O'Rourke, well, we've also got Cole Jamieson, we've also got Henry Shipley as three big behemoth seamers. Who's leading the Ford Trophy for wickets right now? I'll also say Will O'Rourke is averaging under 20 in all three formats this season. Pretty damn impressive. Christian Clark is first for Ford Trophy wickets from Northern Districts, 22-year-old. And he's a 22-year-old who is also fourth for Plunkett Shield wickets. Who's second for Ford Trophy wickets? Well, it's Ray Toole, a lefty from CD. He's a bit older. He's 26 years of age. And he is fifth for Plunkett Shield wickets. Who's my favourite seamer in domestic cricket?
Mr. Zachary Fox.
Yeah, finally got one right. It is Zach Fox. He's averaging 18 in Plunkett Shield with the ball, and he's got 10 wickets and an average of 26 in Ford Trophy. He is 6th for wickets in the Ford Trophy. He is 8th for wickets in Plunkett Shield. He's 21 years old. The thing that I love about Zach Fox is we saw this against Tim Seifert in the last round of Ford Trophy, hooping in swing and knocks the stumps over. But before that, in the Ford Trophy game prior, he was bowling to Sean Solier, who's a lefty batter. So that hooping in swinger becomes an outswinger to Sean Solier, and Zach Fox has dismissed Sean Solier a few times now, knocking the off stump over with an outswinger. So if you go to Christian Clark did take a baggie of wickets in the Ford Trophy with a few short balls that were quite wide, and Wellington's batters just decided to hit them to fielders. But he's just got a bit more about him than I think he appears to have. Just a heavier ball, bit of seam movement, maybe a bit quicker. I've talked about it before, slamming that front leg down just seems to disguise length or disguise how heavy that ball is going to be. So, and then you throw in Nathan Smith, Wellington seamer. He's second for wickets in the Plunkett Shield, and he's pretty solid across all three formats. There's a lot of young seamers around Aotearoa, and if we're celebrating Will O'Rourke, I think folks need to understand that there's a couple more lads who are of a similar quality. Now, they're not of Will O'Rourke's quality because they're not in the Blackcaps test mixer right now, but they all have something about them, and this is something I've said all season. These young seamers, they bowl a bit quicker. They got a bit more skill than the kind of typical Kiwi medium pacer that we used to have. And I think that's like what a lot of people, the perception of Kiwi seam bowlers is that typical Kiwi medium pacer. Well, you want a bit of pace? We got Ben Sears, we got Matt Fisher. You want all-rounders? Well, Josh Clarkson's taken a few wickets, Zach Fox can bat, and Luke Georgeson, Otago all-rounder, he just took a fifer. And he bowls a bit quicker than you expect. Ben Lister, lefties, again. Ben Lister, he's a funky lefty. Say it all the time. He moves the ball away from right-handers. Ray Toole is a more quintessential Trent Bolt type of lefty. And then not a young seamer, but Andrew Hazeldine. He's fast. He's aggressive. And he's a lefty. So there we've got, I feel like I'm repeating myself. I've done this rant a few times before. But you got the behemoths. Cole Jamieson, Henry Shipley, Will O'Rourke. You got the speedsters, Ben Sears, Matt Fisher, and they're both behind Lockie Ferguson and Adam Milne. You got the all-rounders, Zach Fox, Luke Georgeson, Muhammad Abbas, all-rounder who bowls lefty seam. You got the swingers. You got the lefties. You got the nibblers. Like, there's so many different types of seamers. Let alone like Auckland. They just handed a debut to Angus Oliver. He looks to have some good zip. Auckland also recently made Jock McKenzie a debut in Super Smash and Ford Trophy. He moves the ball. He's a natural bowler. He might be choosing cricket over rugby. There's so many good young seamers. Another lefty, we've got Ewald Schroeder, who just played for the New Zealand Under-19 World Cup team. He came back from that World Cup, made his debut for Northern Districts, took a wicket. So there's a lot of like seam bowling depth across Aotearoa that I am enjoying, and it's in tune with what we are seeing from Willow Rock right now. Like there are a lot more seamers that people need to know about, especially the ones we don't even know about, because I think they're going to be pretty good as well. Judging by how the youngsters, how skillful they are, the athletes they are, they all bowl with decent pace. They're all very skillful. They've got good actions. Like you can tell they haven't been coached out of their natural action, which I love as well.
Yeah, I mean that just reminds me of something I was thinking about the Tall Ferns as well, is how you get like they had two 18-year-old centers in that squad, Lauren Whitaker and Ratoya Tamilo. They do different things. Like they're both similar size, but Tamilo's quite, skinny frame. Whitaker's more solid. Whitaker's therefore stronger and does more of the screening stuff. Tamilo likes to set a screen, then roll to the hoop kind of thing. She's got a good jump shot. Actually, both of them have good jump shots. Whitaker's a unexpectedly excellent passer, and like these, they complement each other really well. To the point where in the last game they actually spent some time with Whitaker at power forward and then both on the floor together. I'm thinking, well, there's like the variety there. Like one starts one game, the other starts the next two. Like you got a decade of being able to alternate between those two, doing different things for different opponents, and that's without even considering whoever else might be coming back into the fold. In that time, whoever else might be emerging in that time. Like that variation is so important, and it's probably the Blackcaps sort of emerging seamer depth is probably the best. The best I can think of anyway of that example in Kiwi sport right now is just there's someone who does a little bit of everything, and there's every one of these guys has one aspect of their game that they just do better than anyone else, and that's a hell of a thing to have when you've got that level of variety pushing through. I love that. I love to see that.
I'll also highlight batters who have got 3 scores over 50 in the Ford Trophy. So we got Brett Hampton, who is still right there with Finn Allen, 300 plus runs with strike rates over 120. Brett Hampton's got a century and 250s. Then you go Troy Johnson, he's got 350s. We'll go Thorne Parks from Otago, he's got 350s, and Curtis Heafy, he has 350s as well. Troy Johnson, he's 26 years old. Thorne Parks, he's 23 years old. And Curtis Heafy, he's 20 years old. So the players, Brett Hampton's a bit older, he's over 30, 31, 32. The players with 350s in Ford Trophy, one's 26, the others are 23 or younger, which is pretty impressive for the young batting crew. Troy Johnson's really interesting because he did have that catch in the Super Smash, but he didn't play a whole lot of Super Smash cricket, but he is a very good one-day batter. His best mahi comes in the one-day format, and his quote-unquote worst mahi comes in the T20 format, but he's a very good one-day batter, and he's pretty damn good at Plunkett Shield batting as well. So there's that little cluster of players with 3 scores over 50 is pretty impressive as youngsters. You could argue either way, because Heafy's got a strike rate of 56 and Parks has a strike rate of 69. So it's a bit different to Brett Hampton and Finn Allen, a bit different to Logan Van Beek, who are over 100 strike rates. Chad Bowes is on 96 strike rate. So these dudes aren't rocking and rolling for their scores, but as youngsters, they're grafting away, they're seeing through good spells of bowling in the one-day format, they're kind of anchoring their innings, which is even more interesting when you consider Thorne Parkes leads Otago for runs, and Curtis Heafy is 10 runs, or he's not even 10 runs. Yeah, roughly 10 runs behind Brad Schmullian, who just hit a century as CD's best batter. So a couple of youngsters to watch out for there with the bat in hand. Righto. We have the Blackcaps test team has been named, and we're approaching the start of play. Will O'Rourke and Neil Wagner coming in. We got Will Young stepping in at number 5 for Daryl Mitchell, which means Will Young, he's opened the batting. He's probably batted 3 or 4 at some stage, maybe not in Test cricket. But I think
he might have played 4 because his debut was for. I remember him coming in for Taylor, but then I also remember that happened, and then he didn't get to play because there was a terrorist attack. He might have played. Let's see.
No, he didn't play that game. But now he's batting number 5.
No, he might have played since, but who knows? Yeah, he's batting 5 today.
So he's batting 5. So it means Mitchell Santner drops out, and they've still got the spin options, plural, with Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra. What do you make of the inclusions of O'Rourke and Neil Wagner together?
Well, I picked the O'Rourke one that he was going to play instead of Jamieson as a sort of scheduled rest for Jamieson, so I'm happy with that. I thought they could have kept Santner in and just batted Phillips at 5 at the expense of Young, but I'm glad Young's getting a go. I think either way, there's no wrong decision in that. In that one, I don't expect this as a necessity to have a spinner in the same way as the Mount Maunganui pitch was, but even then, they've got 2 spinners who both took wickets in the first test, so it's not like they're going in with nothing there. Not as good as Santner, but they'll do a job. My main inclination is that it feels like this might be Neil Wagner's last test match, and I don't know. I hope he takes some wickets. I hope he does well, but it kind of is the implication over the last sort of 12 months, maybe a little bit longer, is that Wagner's has felt less essential to this team and compared to where he was in the past. And I don't know. I get the feeling there's a lot of sentimentality about him getting to play against South Africa, and I don't expect him to play against Australia. I can't remember what our next test series is after that, but he doesn't often play in the away ones anyway because you're more likely to need a spinner there. I think this might be the farewell match for old Wagner, but we'll leave that one up to him. He'll let him make that decision, but that is my inclination of that.
I don't know, we have to wait and see, but there's plenty of options. And I mean, O'Rourke, Wagner, and Will Young, they aren't necessarily first 11 players. So now the Blackcaps come into the second test with 3 players stepping in. So we can obviously, it's nothing compared to what South Africa are dealing with. I don't like Roman numerals. Like, there's no need to.
I do.
Well, that it's rude to assume that everyone can figure out Roman numerals. Like, we're not taught Roman numerals at any stage. Like, no one says, like, this is, like, young kids. It's less fortunate young kids. How are they supposed to know what Roman numerals are? I just don't like it. Like, just write 11, write 15. Like, who gives a crap? And I've seen you write Roman numerals, and I'm not happy, but it's all right.
Well, we disagree on that, but
Well, how is everyone meant to know what Roman numerals mean?
You read enough stuff where they use them, you pick it up. I remember there's a gag in The Simpsons one time where Bart had to figure out Roman numerals, and he just started counting out Rocky movies.
Well, it's the same. It's the Super Bowl. It's just like,
yeah.
Instead of
well, the Super Bowl have gone too far because it's one thing you can figure out what 3 is. Super Bowl are in the 50s. It's Yeah,
I just find Roman numerals ridiculous. But now I've lost my train of thought because I got frustrated.
Bloody Romans.
So the South African Romans don't even exist anymore. Like, what are we doing using their numbers? Crikey.
It's their one legacy.
It's nothing compared to what South Africa are dealing with, but you still have 3 players stepping into the Blackcaps team, couple of changes for this game, again highlighting the depth and the fact that you can replace Kyle Jamieson with Will O'Rourke. highlights what I'm saying about the funk in the seam bowling department. I will obviously be fascinated to see how the second test plays out. But if we noted that South Africa went to Bay Oval without a specialist spinner, and now they go to Hamilton and it's a green track with the Blackcaps playing four seamers, and you choose to bat first, that's a bit weird.
That's risky. Yeah, it's very risky.
Well, who's to say it works or doesn't work? I just find it weird. It's like, again, a bit of nitty-gritty information, bit of nitty-gritty knowledge. We know Bay Oval's going to favour the spin bowlers throughout the test, and you don't play a frontline spinner. Now you come to Seddon Park, where it seems a bit more in tune with regular Kiwi conditions, and you're going to have a bat first. Regardless of how strong your team is, regardless of how many first 11 players you do or don't have, those decisions don't help you out. And we'll see how the second test plays out. South Africa might score 500 runs in the first innings, and we'll discuss that on the subscriber podcast on Thursday. But at the moment, it seems like regardless of who is or isn't available for South Africa, each test has started with some quirky moves.
Yep, and I guess that's one of the things about this. They've also, their captain is one of the test debutants and amongst, and you suppose you got to expect some rookie mistakes on the captaincy front, as well as in some of the bowling and batting in the field and blah blah blah, which we did see a fair bit of in the first test. Yeah, these pitches tend to get better for batting on as they go along, so it's very surprised to see them want to bat first. But maybe it'll be a masterstroke. Maybe they'll, as you say, maybe they'll put up 500. Who knows? I don't think they will, though.
Well, hey. Stranger things have happened, and we'll wait and see. We'll obviously enjoy the action. You can stay tuned. Might be dropping some Blackcaps bits and bobs on Twitter and Facebook tomorrow morning. And the morning after that, we'll be covering Kiwi sport to the best of our ability, as we always do. Stay tuned. Tap in with all the podcasts and all the niche case content. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. A chur chur.